if Europe plays the NATO bill, then we're going to get European-style universal health care. You guys are down?
I'm not commenting on healthcare. I'm saying,
because you said they got all these.
I didn't hear her say that.
I'm just saying, you're talking about what they got. What that got to do with him lying?
Lying?
He lied. He said that they didn't. He said that they didn't help out. They helped. He said that they haven't been there for all. Let's say
it's not even funny. It's just embarrassing at a certain point. When are we going to get back to a serious White House?
So one thing I really love when debating or going head-to-head with MAGA supporters is that you can often use their own words against them to expose the hypocrisy and the lack of accountability they show. In this clip, we want to see Van Jones, Abby Phillip, and the rest of the CNN panel push back hard against some MAGA defenders. The discussion focuses on Donald Trump's comments about NATO allies and the sacrifices those allies made following the attacks on September 11th. You'll see the panel challenge the narrative and highlight the contradictions. As usual, let's watch the clip in full. I'll share some thoughts along the way and give more of my perspective toward the end. Let's get into it.
All right, next for us. Allies are livid at Donald Trump tonight, not over Greenland, but his claim that NATO troops avoided the front lines in Afghanistan. Even Prince Harry is calling him out for it. We'll debate next. President Trump is angering America's allies over new comments he made, once again undermining NATO.
I've always said, will they be there if we ever needed them? And that's really the ultimate test, and I'm not sure of that. We've never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. You know, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines.
Now, in the wake of 9/11, the United States became the first and so far the only NATO member to invoke Article 5. The alliance sent thousands of troops to help the United States fight its war in Afghanistan. And Trump's remarks have outraged lawmakers across the political spectrum, as well as veterans and families of those who gave their lives. Tonight, Prince Harry, who served in Afghanistan, also pushed back, writing in part, quote, "Thousands of lives were changed forever. Those sacrifices deserve to be spoken about truthfully and with respect, as we all remain united and loyal to the defense of diplomacy and peace." President Trump, he's the president, but he seems to not have very much grasp of recent history or not so recent history. But in this case, it is astoundingly disrespectful to our allies to suggest that they did nothing when they actually did quite a lot.
Well, I think we can do two things here. I mean, we could and should acknowledge when our allies have been there for us, and they have been there for us. But there's nothing wrong with holding our allies accountable, which I think is part of what the president's been doing, particularly with Europe, where we've seen they have moved closer into the arms of China, where we have seen them become more and more reliant on Vladimir Putin for their energy needs. And for years, they've been saying they were going to step up and put more money into their own defense and national security, and they didn't do it. And it took President Trump coming in to get them to do it. So I can kind of understand some of the frustrations that he brings forward.
What that got to do with him lying?
Lying.
He lied. He said that they didn't. He said that they didn't help out. They helped. He said that they haven't been there for all. Let's say everything you just said is true.
I started my statement by saying I think we could and should acknowledge when our allies are there.
I know. All right, but then so that's the first part. This is what I like. So the first part is and then the second part is where you launder. The second part of your sentence, you launder what he said as if there's some universe which it's sane in, and it's not. There's no
I didn't launder anything. I stated facts.
You
laundered it because all three things that I said were facts.
President Trump, he came out and he said something that's demonstrably untrue. But let me tell you why it's not that bad in the grand scheme of things. He's the president of the United States. The stuff that he says matters. We should care as an American community whether or not he's saying things that are true and whether or not he's saying things that our reputation benefits from. And he's not doing that. He's acting crazy.
And that right there is actually a very valid point. I'll keep this brief. But what Van Jones just said really stood out. I always say the humiliation ritual continues because MAGA supporters constantly have to bend themselves into pretzels, trying to defend things that simply can't be defended. The United States is the only country that has ever triggered Article 5 of the NATO Treaty. And when that happened, countries across Europe came to America's defense. That matters. It should be acknowledged and respected. Now, yes, Europe probably does need to contribute more to defense spending, But that's not the point here. This wasn't something you should try to use to defend Donald Trump's comments, because like I always say, you simply can't defend the indefensible.
Particularly harmful when it's statements that undercut the sacrifice that a lot of these families made. And it was great to see Senator Tom Tillis list out the countries and the amount of people who died. UK, 457. I mean, I know that he has continuous beef with NATO, but at some point we have to say, okay, a line has been crossed, and we're talking about young men and women who died and sacrificed themselves when they didn't have to
Let
for
me
this
just play
country.
what one of those families said, a family who lost or whose child sustained serious injuries in Afghanistan.
It's disgraceful, it's disrespectful, it's hurtful. These are the rantings of a child. This is somebody who is deflecting from other things that he said, and it's not acceptable in a supposed leader of the free world.
It is, to Van's point, not even remotely in the same universe of things for Trump to have complaints about whether NATO is, committing enough to their defense, or whether or not they are too close to China, maybe they're taking Russian oil. It's not in the same universe as him then using falsehoods to essentially smear people who sacrificed their lives for us, Americans.
Yeah, they died. People died, and they were on the front lines. And so you're right, he did lie, and I wish more Republicans would come out and speak out against him. The crazy thing about this is the second time I have seen a clip in the last sort of 5 days from an ally or from someone essentially saying that Donald Trump is acting like a child. We saw this in Greenland, where he admitted that because he didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize, that's why he was upset about Greenland and wanted to, at every turn, he is embarrassing us on the world stage, and it is embarrassing that he is now being called a child.
And I just want to say, as someone from the outside looking in, please try to understand this. I walk around every day here in the UK. I see the headlines. I see the front pages of British newspapers. I hear the conversations people are having when they're sitting in cafes or talking with friends. And right now, the way many people are looking at the United States is with a bit of a side eye. And honestly, that's sad to see. People know that there's still a couple more years left in this presidency. But whoever comes next, whether it's a Democrat or someone else, is going to have a lot of work to do rebuilding the trust the United States once had with the rest of the world. There's going to be a lot of repair needed.
Put up real quick the penguin meme, because I think this speaks to what you're talking about. There is a kind of acceptance of a dumbing down of not just politics, but I mean, this is like foreign policy. He's walking, it's a meme, right? He stole a meme from somebody else. It's AI generated. There are no penguins on Greenland. There are no penguins in the Northern Hemisphere.
Unfortunate.
It's not even funny. It's just embarrassing at a certain point. When are we going to get back to a serious White House?
Well, look, I disagree with the president's comments, basically diminishing Europe's aid. And I'm super grateful for every veteran. And we should never pretend that they didn't sacrifice their lives, because that is such an important contribution. But I think a couple things we saw at Davos this week, I think Americans, just generally, if I can kind of talk about how the MAGA base feels about this, they feel like we've contributed over the years, and we have, $22 trillion to NATO. And they look at Europe and they kind of feel like we're the older sibling who's spending for everyone's defense. And meanwhile, people in Europe are living La Dolce Vita. They're taking August off. And we're basically kind of bankrolling their lifestyle. And they have all these fabulous social benefits. Well, we can't buy houses, and we don't have paid maternity leave, and we don't have all these things in the U.S. And so I think that's what he was trying to communicate. And obviously, that was not done in a great way. But the other piece
those are choices that we make in the United States.
What you
we
guys
could
are
certainly
saying,
have paid maternity leave.
We got common ground. You guys are saying that if Europe plays the NATO bill, then we're going to get European-style universal health care. You guys are down?
I'm not commenting on healthcare. I'm saying,
because you said they got all of these.
I didn't hear her say that.
I'm just saying, you're talking about what they got Because I'm down for it.
I'm
They
saying,
can
how
pay
does
for
the
it all.
average American feel when people in France
Just come
are
on.
living
Let's
La
start a
Dolce
movement.
Vita
All right, guys.
Dolce
and
Vita.
we're bankrolling their lifestyle?
Next for us.
Boom. And just like that, as usual, MAGA hypocrisy exposed. You see, there's no surprise that she tried to utilize that as a kind of gotcha at us guys here in Europe. And yes, we definitely do have our own problems here in Europe, for me, especially here in the United Kingdom. But when Van Lathan flipped on what she just said back on her, she changed the narrative. The conversation, the point she tried to make was, oh, Europe can have things like free healthcare, they can have these social programs. Okay, if that's your argument, no problem. But that's something that can be addressed by the President of the United States if it aligns and fits with his agenda. But the reality is it doesn't. So trying to utilize that, Van Lathan then said, okay, if you're saying that if we were to, go with Donald Trump's narrative towards NATO, we're going to get stuff like, better social things that are going to help us, Americans Sustain ourselves, better social programs. I'm down for that. Then did you hear it was ahhing, stuttering? I didn't say that. I don't think she said that. But it's just funny, the hypocrisy when it comes to these guys and the lengths and the extent they will go to try and defend Donald Trump, almost to the point that it is that they have just made, they will go back on it simply because they don't want to have a conversation in good faith. They're just making points. That's all it is that they're doing. And she made a point, and when someone said, okay, if I were to give you that, would we get XYZ in return? Oh, that's not what it is that I said. Oh, and ahhing. Honestly, that's the reason why I will continuously say on this channel, being a Republican, being MAGA, being a conservative at this current moment, it's just a humiliation ritual. That's all it is. And nobody will be able to change my mind on that. That's all it is a humiliation ritual. Absolutely crazy stuff. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this exchange and the thoughts and the comments that was made in this clip. I think Van Lathan had some very, very good points. As usual, MAGA Republicans, Republicans strategists, political commentators that lean to the right, they just speak rubbish. And I'm sorry to be so rude and so crude about it, but they just speak absolute nonsense. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section below. Give the video a thumbs up as usual. And I will see you guys in the next one, guys. See you later.
Boom. And just like that, MAGA hypocrisy exposed once again. There's really no surprise that she tried to use that point as some kind of gotcha directed at people here in Europe. And look, yes, we absolutely have our own problems here in Europe. Speaking personally, we definitely have plenty of issues in the United Kingdom as well. But when Van Jones flipped her argument back on her, the entire narrative shifted. The point she was trying to make was essentially that Europe can afford things like universal health care and broader social programs because of the way our systems work. That was clearly the direction she was going with the argument. And honestly, if that's the argument you want to make, fine. No problem. That's a policy discussion. That's something the President of the United States could pursue if it actually aligned with his agenda and priorities. But the reality is, it doesn't. So when Van Jones responded by saying something along the lines of, okay, if we follow Donald Trump's logic about NATO and the spending conversation, does that mean Americans would get stronger social programs and support systems in return? Suddenly the tone changed. Then you could hear the hesitation, the stuttering, the backtracking. Oh, that's not what I said. I didn't say that. But that's exactly the implication of the argument that had just been made. And that's what makes these exchanges so revealing. It shows the hypocrisy and the lengths people will go to when they're trying to defend Donald Trump. Sometimes they'll even walk back the very point they just made moments earlier simply because they don't want to engage in a genuine conversation. Instead of debating in good faith, it often becomes about throwing out talking points. That's it. Just tossing out arguments without really standing behind them when someone challenges them. Because the moment someone says, all right, if we accept your premise, then does that mean we get X, Y, and Z in return? Suddenly the answer becomes, no, that's not what I meant. And honestly, that's why I keep saying on this channel that being a MAGA Republican right now often feels like a humiliation ritual. I know that sounds harsh, but it's hard to see it any other way when you watch moments like this unfold. The mental gymnastics required to defend some of these positions are just unbelievable. Absolutely wild stuff. Let me know your thoughts on this exchange and the comments made during this clip. Personally, I think Van Jones made some very strong points here. And as usual, a lot of the Republican strategists and commentators leaning to the right ended up talking themselves into circles. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Give the video a thumbs up as usual, and I'll see you guys in the next one.